Welcome to New York Nonprofit Media. My name is Jeff Stein, and I'm very pleased to be here in the CEO Corner with Fred Schack, CEO of Urban Pathways, one of the most prominent nonprofits here in the city, providing services for homeless New Yorkers in terms of safe havens, supportive housing, drop-in centers. Thank you so much for coming here to speak about your work.
Thanks for having me.
And obviously, there's so much going on right now in terms of homeless policy here in the city. I know that you're on a task force that the Blasio administration has assembled to deal with supportive housing. I was hoping that maybe you could speak a little bit about your role in that and where you hope to see city policy moving in terms of supportive housing and also homeless services in general.
Well, I mean, there's a direct association between what's happening currently in the city and the issues that we've been working on for 40 years. Urban Pathways focuses primarily on the chronically homeless. So those New Yorkers that you see as you travel throughout the city on subways and on the sidewalks and on the streets are our core population. These are the chronically homeless single adults. The Blasio administration has done an amazing job in committing 15,000 units of supportive housing to address the chronic housing needs of this population. And he's been partnered by the governor, who's made a commitment to add another 20,000 units of supportive housing. We've been working for the last year and a half, 2 years, trying to get another commitment from both city and state to increase the supply of supportive housing, because we really see that as being the alternative to people living on the street.
So
and the real solution.
New York.
Yeah, well, they're not calling it New York, New York.
Okay.
It's not an agreement between both the city and the state at this point. We're hoping that will become the case at some point, because we think that it provides some guarantees that the pipeline will continue over the life of the current administrations and beyond. And I think that's an important component. But the number of units that we have far surpasses what we've gotten in the past, and it's going to make a substantial difference in our ability to provide long-term options for people who are currently residing on the streets of the city.
I'd be interested to hear your response to, I've heard some arguments saying, really we need to have a working sort of solution to the homeless population, empowerment through employment opportunities as opposed to a focus on just housing. Why do you think supportive housing has to be front and center in the solution?
Well, the homeless population is not a monolithic group.
Right.
So there are homeless families, there are single adults who are what we refer to as Gen Pop. These are folks who don't have any disabling conditions that make it difficult for them to find viable employment. But the reality is that even if you work, and there are a significant number of individuals in both the family and the single adult system who are employed, we recognize that the cost of housing in New York is prohibitive. A studio apartment, the fair market rent, and that's at 40% of the point in the market where 40% of the units are available, is about $1,100 a month. So if you're making $20,000 a year, it is so far out of reach. So working and jobs, it's an important component, but it's not the solution. The real solution for the lion's share of the homeless population is housing that's affordable. So for most of those families that are in the shelter system now, if we had a set of housing subsidies that are funded both by the city, the state, and the federal government, things like Section 8, it would go a long way in addressing that. But as I indicated earlier, the population that we're most concerned about are people who have chronic conditions. So these are folks who are seriously, persistently mentally ill. The folks that you see on the sidewalks and on the subways, sort of really disoriented, either because of their mental health issues or because of their addiction. These individuals cannot survive without having some kind of a supportive housing unit that will provide them with housing that's affordable, first and foremost, but then provide them with the services that they need in order to move towards recovery.
Right.
The model works.
It does seem like supportive housing is always sort of playing catch up, though, in terms of the amount of units that are available for a ballooning population. And I know that some argue, well, if funding is cut, like in the Advantage program or other funding streams, then that population is sort of left out to dry. How do you keep up with the need over a period of time?
Well, there's a flaw in the assumption. The assumption is that it doesn't cost us anything to do nothing.
Right.
The reality is that we spent $1.7 billion on homeless services last year. The cost of keeping people on the street is extremely high, and you see it in emergency room visits and emergency ambulance responses and police time, in short-term hospital stays and short-term incarceration for violations of jumping turnstiles and sort of minor kinds of criminal violations. So it's not free to keep a person on the street. The question is whether or not we want to invest in long-term solutions that really address the problem, or do we want to continue to invest in things like shelter, which is a short-term solution, or keeping people on the street and spending $20,000 to $30,000 a year to maintain them in that condition.
Mm-hmm. The point of contention that was sort of highlighted today in the city budget hearings was state comptroller, in his review of the preliminary budget, said, pointed a red flag, saying that the assumption of the city was that the homeless shelter population was going to drop, I think, 15% over the next year, and DiNapoli was saying that's unrealistic. Do you think that that's an unrealistic goal? Do you think that funds need to be allocated in a different way?
Right. Again, I think it's important to be ambitious and optimistic. I think it's a misconception to think that it's an either or. We're going to spend those dollars. The question is whether or not we spend those dollars on solutions that are humane and that provide long-term options for individuals, or do we continue to spend those dollars? And quite frankly, as a taxpayer, I think it's a waste of my money to have to walk across someone on the sidewalk because we're not willing to commit to long-term solutions like supportive housing. The last time we did a major investment in supportive housing, what we found was that the homeless population on the single side significantly dropped. I think the problem is that we've not sustained it. And again, it's not sustaining those investments as a result of, and as a result of that, not sustaining it, what we've seen is a growth in the total homeless population. So if we can make the commitment, if we can do what works, if we can continue to invest there as opposed to somewhere else, we'll find that while he may be overly ambitious and 15% this year, that those numbers will go down and they'll stay down.
Mm-hmm. Switching gears a little bit, I know that your organization, amongst many others, are up in Albany today for a lobby day, the so-called 15 in Funding campaign. Are you concerned right now? The Cuomo administration has not really budged as of yet in terms of funding for the nonprofit sector, for the minimum wage?
I think the governor has come a long way. 9-10 months ago, he wasn't supporting a minimum wage increase at all. The fact that he's now traveling the state campaigning hard for a commitment to raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour in New York State is a recognition that in order for people to be able to live and to support themselves in this environment, in this economy, you need to be making at least $15 an hour. So I think that's step one. I do believe that, and I think he was quoted in talking with another group earlier this week, that he will make the funds available because he recognizes the things that we do are state mandated services. So it's not like they're optional kinds of services. So my feeling is that we will get a commitment from the governor to provide funding to make sure that those people who are doing the work that we do at the very basic levels can work 40 hours a week and afford to live in the city and afford to take care of their families.
Maybe as a final question, what do you think are the biggest challenges that you see in the population that you serve right now that are maybe surprising to people who do view homeless New Yorkers as a monolithic kind of group?
I think the biggest challenge is getting people to understand that we know what works, that we've known for a number of years that there are real solutions that are cost effective, that really will move someone who has lived on the streets for a significant number of years into an apartment and eventually into a level of self-functioning that sort of maximizes their potential, and that is doable. I think it's really getting that message out that we don't have to live in an environment in a society where people are relegated to living on our streets. And if you invest the resources, we can really turn it around.
Great. Well, thanks so much for being here and speaking to us about all of that.
Thank you for having me.